Board games, board games, it's what I'm talking about. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this streaming with a little bit of singing, and over there is the person known as Tanya Floaker. Tanya has made a zine and is going to do it again, which I mean, we're going to talk about this thing, and there's the rub. This thing was made by a club, and we'll talk about that too. And maybe we will talk to you anyway. Board games and RPGs is what we're talking about. Games, zines, game clubs, and creation. I'm not gonna shout. Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. This is episode 386 of Busy Beats and Board Game Bladder. And I just want to acknowledge that it is exactly 2 weeks until episode 400, which is going to be an epic thing. Sorry for this. Like, I am going to do a 24-hour stream, and I just kind of sent an email to someone I massively respect. I don't expect them to come on, but one of, the legendary game designers. And if they say yes, then, amazing, they will come on. If they don't, then so be it. But it's like, hey, I'm doing this thing for 25 hours. Literally any time that you want to come on, you can come on. And I'm going to have, some special guests. One person I'm really excited about has already picked a time, and one person I'm really excited about has already said, oh, I'm sorry I didn't pick a time. I'll pick a time soon. But anyway, sorry, this is not about episode 400. Let's get to talking about Tanya Floaker, who is over there. We're chatting about games, zines, game clubs, and creation. And yeah, Tanya, we were talking before the show, and hello, Nicholas. It is lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. But yeah, Tanya, we were talking before how we have met each other before in Glasgow, maybe 10 years ago, because the indie games community, I'm more of the board game side. You're a wee bit more of the RPG side. You're a wee bit more of the storytelling. Whereas the games that I play, quite often there's a winner, there's a loser, and maybe some people think, oh, I didn't do quite as well in a story game. Like, everyone's just building a beautiful story together, and they know that everyone's going to fail in Fiasco, or they know that everyone's going to die, or whatever. And this is like a totally different style of gaming. And a quick also hello to Rita. Thank you so much for saying hello. We are joined by the wonderful Tanya Floaker. Can you talk a wee bit about who you are and what you're all about?
Oh yeah, so I've been let's go back in the dawn of time. I've been gaming for about 30 years, over 30 years now, and it started as a small seed in my grandmother's bedroom, my granny's bedroom, when my cousin decided to run Advanced Fighting Fantasy, which for folks in Britain, you'll know the little solo game books. I'd been playing them already for a few years. My cousin got hold of this bigger book, and it had these rules where you play with more than one person. And so I was hooked immediately.
Wait, it's an RPG based on the fighting fantasy world.
Yes.
But which one? Because the fighting fantasy worlds are all unconnected.
There's the whole world of Alanzia has 3 sort of continents on it, if I remember correctly. This is 9-year-old knowledge coming back to the fore. And so, but I was absolutely hooked. My cousin just ran this little adventure for me, and then I went away and immediately started trying to get hold of it and run things and play things, and it was really cool. And so jump forward, by the time I hit high school, I was involved with running the high school games club and sort of playing there one lunchtime and one after school every week. and I got into like a lot of board games there. So we played lots of Risk and some Diplomacy and that kind of thing, and Space Crusade from Games Workshop and MB Games.
And these are really big British names. I mean, if you're outside of Britain, Fighting Fantasy and Games Workshop might not mean so much to you, but Games Workshop was like the original way that Dungeons and Dragons came to the UK. Then Games and Workshop, of course, now are basically just based on Warhammer and Model-y stuff, but they used to be all sorts of things.
Yeah, they published Call of Cthulhu, they published Rune Quest, they published a Judge Dredd game, like loads of sort of random stuff came through that way. And so, yeah, we were just playing like all sorts of stuff. I'd started Blood Bowl before that through my cousin again, and we started like Warhammer stuff, and it basically just snowballed from there. I ran the first game I ran ever was at my high school. Was of tried to run it before at primary school. It didn't go so well, and I ran it at high school. Was Advanced Fighting Fantasy. Then I played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, so we're back into the sort of Games Workshop territory. And then I think after that played AD&D First Edition because someone had picked it up from a charity shop and played that. And then after that was just like an explosion. So of games.
So that sounds fantastic. And a quick hello to Timmy, based in Nova Scotia, who says, yeah, Games Workshop does exist in Canada. And maybe my connection is a wee bit bad. I just saw you glitch, but Timmy says it's fine on their end. So thank you for that. What's that word I'm looking for? Tech troubleshooting. So, but yeah, I am out in the garden, as you can tell. But yeah, it is just a delight to meet you. And before we get properly into who you are, what are some of your favorite things, what's our zines all about, how do you make a club, we're going to get into all of that. But let's first talk about some recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. So what have been some games that you have played? What have been some of your more recent games? Let me know.
Okay, recently I've been playing. I played Honey Heist with the club the other day. So it's basically a game where you are sentient bears trying to sneak into the honey convention to get the great honey pot loot, and it was sort of like very gonzo play, very fast acting. It's based on lasers and feelings, so it's a role play game with only 2 stats. You've got.
So how many people do you need to play this?
I think I'd play it with 3 and up. Like I could probably play it with quite a big group as well, because it's very gonzo play. You can have folks off in different parts of the sort of story, all trying different things. It's like Yogi Bear meets Ocean's 11. Like
that sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, totally. And it was
and
very
you've
funny.
Been playing these things online, I guess.
Yeah. That was all through the Edinburgh Indie Gamers Club that I'm part of, and we meet twice a month to do one-shot games. So, like, often we don't know what game we'll be playing on the night. It's just people turn up. Everyone pitches different games that they like the sound of, and then we pick one of the games or a couple of the games, depending on how many folks there or more, and then we split off into groups and play them. So
sounds
a lot of
fantastic. Timmy's got a wee recent highlight of downloading Unreal Engine 5, because Timmy's working on a video game, and I hope that you enjoy playing around with that. And I'll be curious to know how he gets on, even though I am not a techie person at all, but I'll be curious to know in very vague terms, like, do you prefer it or not? And Timmy says, I would like to try Dungeons and Dragons sometime. I assume you're talking about there. But yeah, like, obviously that's the one that people who are unfamiliar with RPGs know. Dungeons and Dragons, that's the big one. Can I ask, before we proceed, I would like to ask you, what draws you to indie stuff? Why are you drawn? Is it being drawn to the fringes? Do you want the variety? What's going on with that?
Well, usually it's because there's sort of like a big chunk of games that I would say that generally get termed trad games. And so they have, although they deal with different settings, the way in which they engage is sort of very much on you have a GM who is the authority on the world, you have a player who is the authority on only their character, and then you have a bunch of stats and you roll dice and you see if you succeed and fail at different actions you're trying. And that can be a lot of fun. Definitely still play games in that sort of field.
And when you say trad games, you mean traditional games that kind of follow that Dungeons and Dragons kind of model, Pathfinder, things like that?
Yeah, 100%. And then if you go into a game, sort of your friendly local game store and you see like these big books that are like 30, 40 quid, they're normally in that sort of trad game design space. But the sort of indie games often come at it a bit like indie cinema, or sort of like they come at it sort of rather than going for a Hollywood blockbuster approach. They have a theme or some underlying message that the game's about, or some feeling that it wants to invoke with you, or some sort of like something that wouldn't be often doesn't need like a big thick book with 200 supplements. You can usually get like the game in one book or one box, and then it does a certain type of story very well. They're not, sometimes you get generic sort of indie games that are designed for play in a certain way, but even then it's sort of like they're trying to present a certain type of game, a certain type of story to help you and your group create that.
So with indie games, you can sort of focus on something. You don't have to be as generalized. You could almost say that whilst a lot of people do use Dungeons and Dragons for role-playing, it is very much focused on the combat. And you could ignore that and you could do wonderful, role-playing stuff. But if you are not engaging with the combat, why not play something that you don't need to read so much about that? Is that kind of your thinking? Like you can specialize with an indie game. You can say, okay, what I want to do is I want to play a game where we're sitting around telling stories about bereavement and loss, and you can have a perfect game for that. So you can say, I want to play a game where we are sitting around a campfire and journeying, and we are going to win. But yes, it might not have the wargaming aspect of D&D, but I guess there's also indie games that do explore that wargaming aspects even more if you want to go down that path. I've not seen them, but I assume there are.
Yeah, definitely exist, and it's a case of just I like the idea that I can pick something that will sort of hit the mood that I'm in to play. Like the other night when we played Honey Heist, I was in the mood for something light, something just sort of comical, something easygoing. But on a different night, I might want to play something like, it'd be like going to the cinema to see a David Lynch psychological surreal thriller, like compared with going to the cinema to see some sort of slapstick comedy. And so I might pick something like Something Is Wrong Here, which is uses a term called bleed, uses the idea that it invokes certain emotions in you through use of the game mechanics, and that those emotions that you're feeling as a person are to bleed into the character, and the emotions you're feeling for your character are meant to bleed back to you. And it's a commentary partly on identity and the surreal nature of self, and so it can get quite weird. But I wouldn't just sit down and play that game like, hey, casually, here's a fun little game to play. Come on down. It's like, I think that you'd have to sort of pitch it. And I think one of the most interesting sort of developments I've seen in recent years of people using style sheets called CAT sheets to sort of
CAT, like the animal.
Yeah, it's an acronym, and I'm blanking out what it's an acronym for, and I should remember. Give me 1 second.
Okay, maybe we can come back to this in a second.
Oh yeah.
While you look that up. but unmute yourself. But what I've been up to yesterday, I did. Firstly, I ventured off to hospital where a friend is just now, but hopefully they'll get better. I managed to wake up early today. I had a nice wander around. It's a beautiful day, as you can see. I have come out into the garden just to enjoy the sunshine, because the sun is all on this side, not on the other side of the house. The other thing is, I did wake up very early this morning. I was playing my subversion of Root, where I was playing the tutorial, intentionally trying to not win, and trying to let the cats, who are my opponents, try to get them as high a score as possible. I was really hoping I would get them to 1,000 points just to see what it looks like. And then maybe when I get to 900, I would like pass 1,000 on stream one day or something. But yeah, I went from like 101 and then I got to like 230 something. And then I was a bit sloppy. I didn't hurt myself enough. Passed 10 points, and so I won and ended the game. So that was the end of it. The cats can't get any more points. I need to start all over again. And so yeah,
back to cats. I find it.
I call it masochistic zombie birds versus stupid cats. You're trying to get the stupid cats to get as many points as possible.
Oh, brilliant. So I found the acronym I was looking for and blanked out. I hate being on live things, so I'm going to blank out a few times here.
Well, that brings us perfectly to, the questionably quick questions. Because the first question I always like to ask is, firstly, where are you and what time is it?
Oh, I'm in Edinburgh and it is 10:16.
And that is in Scotland, UK, Europe, which is just a wee bit north of where I am. I am in London, England, UK, Europe, and it is 10:17 because I've been talking for a bit. And so, next questionably quick question. And if anybody else has any questionably quick questions, then feel free to chuck them in. So my question to you is, what is that cat report stand for? What is that?
Oh yeah, so CATS is it's concept, aim, tone, and subject matter, and you sort of advertise a game with those things: the concept of the game, the aim of the game, the tone you're aiming for, and the subject matter, and then that sort of flags to people what the game's going to be about, so they can have a little. They could tell if it's something they want to be involved in or something they'd rather avoid.
I mean, I can see, like concepts, that's like a one sentence overall pitch, I guess.
Yeah, and, everything here is short.
So like if we were doing, let's say I was doing a game called Monsters and Therapy, which is a Dungeons and Dragons inspired LARP where all the adventurers are now realizing that maybe they were the bad guys all along and they need to go into therapy. And so the concept might be exactly what I said, or would that be too long? It might be those two sentences. The aim might be to learn about your true nature as humans. Tone might be moderately humorous, occasionally delving into real matters of mental illness, and subject matter would be mental health and well-being. Did I do it correctly?
100%. Yeah, so that's it's something I should give credit to the developer who was I can't remember.
And that is the CATS way to CATS, concept, aim, tone, and subject matter to describe your game.
Yeah. So it's a good way to sort of throw up a sort of quick what the game's about for people in advance. And
Timmy is in Nova Scotia. It's 12 degrees centigrade and it's 6:17. Yeah. I'm always amazed that you're still up. Lots of love to the Eternally Awoken one. And hello, Xenofuel. Thank you very much for popping in. We do have a wee questionably quick question from the chat, which is, do you like baked potato?
I do indeed like baked potato, probably with some baked beans on it.
that was my immediate follow-up question. What would you like? Cheesy baked beans? Would you like a slice of cheese on those baked beans?
A little vegan grated cheese would be nice. Like something maybe a bit smoky would be quite tasty. But just with beans, I'm okay. A lot of marge as well. Yum yum.
Would you maybe put some wee bits of Marmite in there?
Oh no!
I mean,
I'm anti veggie / Marmite. Although nutritional yeast, sprinkle that over it. Mwah.
And Timmy says that Timmy has never had baked potato with cheese. I mean,
well, you've never.
I mean, I am a meat eater, and I don't know, with vegan cheese, does it melt with the same wonderment?
Some of the newer ones do. Like it's a minefield going into the vegan cheese section. Some of them are really tasty and good, and some of them will shuffle off, I think, over the next few years, just because they're not very good. Although it isn't like it was 10, 15 years ago, where some of them were just horrid.
Oh, we've definitely got so much great stuff. Okay, my questionably quick question to you is, have you had Bouja Bouja chocolate or Bouja Bouja ice cream?
I've eaten both. Yum yum. Although,
okay. Which one is your favourite?
The chocolate. The ice cream had a little bit of a sort of powdery taste to it. And there's better ice creams out there, but the little chocolates, I could probably eat too many of them at any given time.
And Timmy is talking about Beyond Burgers, which I know are a wee bit more expensive than I personally would pay for a burger, to be honest, but I'm fairly sure they are vegan. Is that right?
I think they are. I think that's their shtick. I've not tried them though, so ow.
I mean, I always wonder when you're like, ooh, Beyond Meat, Beyond whatever, how much are you just trying to... Why are you trying to be that thing? Frankly, okay, I'm going to be maybe a little bit, tiny bit controversial. I think you should embrace the goodness of what you are. Like, I love a veggie burger where it's like just great big stonking chunks of vegetables, you know, mixed into a patty, and it's okay, I can taste the peas, I can taste the kind of, okay, there's a bit of turmeric, maybe potato-y stuff here, okay, there's a bit of cauliflower, like, just, you don't need to do it all fine, just make it into a patty and enjoy the vegetables.
I just don't think they're very good, to be honest. They taste. I'd rather just have some really nice veg on the side and or do something different. But
that's
yeah,
fair.
Each to their own. I've not like people like them, people eat them. It's like all about the animals.
Timmy says my friend is vegetarian and says she feels guilty when eating Beyond Burgers because they taste so much like beef. Wow. And a quick hello to Alex. Xenofuel asks, do you have an opinion on lab-grown meats? Are you excited, grossed out?
It's a bit of an aside, really. If it happens and it's all right and it's not, we can make it in an ecologically sound way, then go for it. But like, I don't need to wait for it. If it turns up, whatever. Like, if it's, yeah,
so
not harming it.
You might be ready to try it.
Oh yeah. If it's a thing and it's not being used, it's not used animals in its production, other animals, and if we can even do it so that it in a way that it doesn't. Ultimately, we'd want to change the world so we don't exploit other humans either. Like that's the way to go for it.
And Xenofuel asks, is it a replacement for vegan stuff? I mean, that's a big question. Like, I mean, it's certainly look. There's so much vegan stuff that even people who eat meat still eat. I mean, it's like, do you not eat chips? Do you not sometimes?
I still eat. Like, I eat potato waffles even though chips exist. Like if somebody comes to me with some deep fried potato, I'm eating it.
I just feel like, I mean, if we had, I think that why not have it all? You know, it's that kind of thing. You know, the meme. Why not both? And then everyone's like, yeah. But anyway, those are some really good, questionably quick questions. And do you have a brilliant thing? Brilliant
I
thing?
do.
What's a little thing which is brilliant?
Well, my little thing that's brilliant at the moment is I got a cheap new desk. Like, I got it secondhand. I got it online. It's like an old school desk almost. It looks like it's been in the back room of some sort of physics teacher's lab or something. It's like, it's not a big desk. It's not a fancy desk. It was cheap and cheerful, and I'm in love with it. It's just like the right size for me. It's got 3 drawers on it. It's perfect. They're nice size. They just, everything about it's just really nice. It isn't even in good condition. It's obviously had some kids doing a punishment exercise at it that have scraped something into the side of it. Like, I just really like it. It's my little thing at the moment that I like. It's my big little thing. My other thing's my water bottle.
Yeah, drinking water. This is actually getting quite warm. I'm going to put it down here in the shade because there we go. I've got a little. And then if you want to share that, they have a keyboard, presumably a keyboard for the computer, not a musical keyboard, that lights up when Xenofuel's hand is near it. Don't need to touch a button. Wow. I mean, that sounds fancy and all, but always my question with the lights up keyboards is why? Like, I guess, like, if it's really entertaining you, then fair enough. But like, I don't want to take away from your brilliant thing. But you know what? That does sound fancy. I'm going to just leave it at that. And also, Xenofuel did have a follow-up. Would lab-grown meat be okay for a vegan diet? I mean, can you eat lab-grown meat and still call yourself vegan? I guess at that point. I mean, I guess at that point you'd have to maybe have a new term.
No, if other animals weren't used in the making of it, then it's fine. It's a nice simple rubric to figure out if something's vegan. Did it use other animals in its production? No, then it's vegan.
Because I know some people do it for compassion reasons or for ecological reasons, but some people also do it for dietary, self-centered health reasons. And if it's the latter, then maybe they don't want to kind of, eat even that.
Me and health vegans don't talk. I'm a junk food eating animal compassion vegan.
And Xenofuel, it sounds like it is absolutely brilliant for you. So I'm glad that you've got the keyboard that works for you. And so yes, we're going to move on to our main topic. Feel free, everyone, to comment, ask questions, fun, like, follow. We are meeting Tanya Floaker, chatting about games, zines, games clubs, and creation. And the first thing I wanted to ask you is, what is the first thing you can remember that you're willing to share?
What, in my entire life?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I can remember being in one of those, those bouncers that you attach to the door frame that you sort of sat in and you bounce up and down. Yeah, I can remember being in one of those, and I must have been really young because you can't be in those after a certain age. And yeah, I can kind of remember that, and I was really young then. So that's definitely a very early memory.
Wow. And yeah, do you have any any songs that what's the first song that you can remember hearing or even singing along to?
Oh my word. Like, probably nursery rhymes, early stuff. And then after that, like the first sort of pop song. Oh, I remember when for my 4th birthday, I got the Roland Rat album. And Roland Rat is like a British puppet, like kids TV morning puppet. Like this rat that lives in underneath the London Underground. Yeah, Roland Rat. Yeah. hello, Rat fans. And so I got that album when I was young. That's my.
Can you
that's
sing
my.
one of the songs?
Let me think. It just sort of went rapping. Do 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 do.
Rapping.
Yeah, rapping. There was also a Pink Bucket reggae song. Like,
What?
look it up. It's probably out there somewhere. Pink Bucket
Pink
reggae.
Bucket's reggae.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
sounds wow ridiculous.
Close to my heart.
Yeah, Timmy's remembers crawling around when 1 year old. Wow. And yeah. Apparently Xenofuel's first word was cookie because of singing along to C is for cookie.
Oh,
do you think that music is a big part of your life at all?
Oh yeah, definitely. I love going to see live bands. I love
Do you
getting
think
into
that
music. Oh. Hello, Bess. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think we spoke over each other because of the lag. I do
Please go on.
apologize. No, I was just going to say, do you think that when you play a role-playing game now, do you often have instrumental music in the background? Do you sometimes use it to set the scene? Do you care about what's going on in the environment in which you're playing?
Depending on the game, I have used music before. Some games I've got actually say use this music at certain times. In some games I prefer not to have any because I want to concentrate more on the game than setting the environment. When I'm running LARPs, I often think a lot about, especially indoor small sort of parlor LARPs, I think a lot about the soundscape involved and try and pick out music that would help either highlight a theme or set a tone for the room. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I guess that's the big benefit when you can sort of control the environment, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I was recently playing Crescent Moon by Emma Acosta, which is a sort of, it's due out soon as she's just released a sort of quick start kit fit. It's a role play game about children that have sort of wandered into another world called the dream. So we're thinking about like something akin to like Peter Pan or Alice in Wonderland or more Studio Ghibli stuff along the Spirited Away lines, that kind of stuff. And so we were talking about that. One of the other players, we couldn't hear it in the background, was using music to help them keep in character and set the scene for themselves. And so we were sort of talking about what music to use. There's a band called Amina that from Iceland. They used to be the backing quartet. It started out as the backing quartet to Sigur Rós, and they do sort of instrumental stuff a lot of the time now. And so that kind of hit the right, just the right sort of feeling for the sort of strange dreamlike situation we were in.
Or you might have Bye Bibba Bamba, if you know that song. Bye Baba Bamba, da 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 ba, bye Baba. It's kind of, yeah, having that tranquil state. And for sure, music has the capacity to evoke so much. And so if we are playing a game, why not pay a little attention and, if you can, decide what goes on in the background? And talking of games, you talked about this earlier on, but what is the very first game that you can remember? What's the first ever gaming memory?
Well, in terms of sort of, I mentioned this before, for sort of something that's actually in the sort of gaming realm that wasn't just a family board game.
Oh, no, go for the family board games.
For family board games, probably there was a board game called The Game of Dracula. And it was sort of like a board game where you had to escape. You're trapped in Dracula's castle, and there's Dracula moving around on the board, and you had to sort of escape. And there were little, if you wandered into the room you were in, you got dragged away and turned into the green vampire, and you had to wear this green cardboard mask. It was really fun.
Have you played Fury of Dracula? Is that anything?
Oh, yeah.
Is it similar to that one?
No, no. I know Fury of Dracula. They are worlds apart. Game of Dracula is for like kids, like very much so a family board game. I don't think it's in production any longer, but you can have a look for that. It's really good. And
One of those that might not even be on Board Game Geek.
I have no idea if it'll be there, to be honest. I hope it is. I hope somebody's remembering it fondly, because it's got a fairly garish board, fairly basic playing pieces, but it worked for us. That and playing card games, like card games with my granny at her house. She had a big round kitchen table, and so the family would sometimes just play like Pontoon or Gin Rummy or something, and yeah, it's nice to do.
Oh, that does sound just delightful. Oh, and I think it is on Board Game Geek. Game of Dracula from 1977 by Steve Curtis and Barton Earl. Let's see if I can actually show any of these pictures. Oh no, they're all licensed, but I will paste the links into all the places. Oh, speaking of links, I totally forgot to share your links, but yeah, that's definitely one I'll be looking at, and it's amazing how many things just have that spark of nostalgia, but then there must still be something good there. Like, even with Monopoly, like, I say there's so much good stuff about Monopoly. Like, I mean, the numbers going up, there is the escalation, there is, you know, surrealism of the pieces that they don't make any sense. That could be argued to be a good thing. I'm starting throwing out some nice things to say about Monopoly, to be honest.
I think that, like, it's the exchange, isn't it? It's the everyone wins and loses as they're going around for a little bit. That's a good thing about it. Like, you're going to land on someone else's property at some point, so everybody gets a little bit. I think it goes too far, but yeah, you know, it's fun. You can always look for the good side.
So, do you think that your family instilled a love of games into you, or did it all come from within, do you think?
I think a mixture of my own personal preference and the environment I was in. I definitely think, like, we definitely played family board games, like, as a special thing to do now and again. It wasn't like a weekly thing, but like it was an activity like that we could do to have fun. Like, Monopoly was definitely there, like a few other different board games were amongst it, and like I say, playing card games was just something to do on a rainy day. So yeah, definitely struck a note. And then when my cousin was slightly older than me and started playing sort of what we see as sort of war games and role play games, and I was already playing solo game books, the Fighting Fantasy solo game books, and so it all just sort of kept going, and it's never really stopped.
And you started setting up game clubs straight away. You really just want to have people to play with. I guess that's the motivation, right? Just a selfish desire to have more people to play with, kind of.
I bet, yeah, I wanted to share. I remember on the last day at primary school, you got to bring in games to play, or bring in toys or bring in stuff. And I brought in, like, I just got Space Crusade for my birthday, and I brought this big box in, and I tried to play it, but only one other person wanted to try it, and I didn't really know the rules because I hadn't played it yet, and it was a bit of wonky, and we kind of sort of still had fun with it. And then when I got to high school, there was already a games club set up, but I sort of jumped in with both feet. I was like, yeah, let's go to that. And then it just snowballed from there. So that was my 6 years at high school, was just involved with that. And then when that ended, I went to university, and there was already a games club in the union there. And so I played in my first year, and in the second year, I was the president of the club. So
Wow.
it carried on from there like that. It's like,
And this is maybe a bit of a broad question, but what actually makes a good games club? Like, were all of these good? Like, when you compare the school to the university and so forth?
Yeah, I think for a games club, what I found has been, because I've been to other clubs and been involved with all different clubs over the years. I think what works really well is having somewhere where there's a strong feeling that when you walk in the door that you're welcomed. Like I've been to some clubs where you walk in the door and it's felt like I've not got a game to play in, or like it's a bit sort of awkward. Like people are all a bit sort of like, who's this coming into our space? And so having spaces that are welcoming and that are friendly and where people engage with you and want to get to know you and then invite you to play along with them, and that there's some sort of way that even if someone comes in like midway through other things happening, that they can be sort of helped into things. I think that's really important. Like the clubs that have always worked and the spaces I've tried to really foster in my adult life have always been sort of aiming towards having sort of welcoming space. And I guess one of my favorite sort of experiences was a club where we got a building where we had lots of sort of individual rooms or lots of individual quiet spaces, so folks could split off into lots of different games without interrupting one another, and could really go to town on what they were running in those spaces if they wanted it to be a certain way. But that's quite a difficult thing to pull off. That was a special time for that came to an end, unfortunately. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that I aim for.
Like, do you think you need a host or something to make sure that it is welcoming? Because you talk about even in the middle of a game, someone should be getting up. And does there need to be, okay, it's you for this night, okay, it's you for this night. Does it need to be, there need to be a mom for... Sorry, that's a very gender-centric way to put it, but...
I think there needs to be organisation. But I really don't think this needs to be like one person who is the boss. I feel like anyone who's like involved with the club, and everyone has a different comfort level about what they'd want to be involved in, and having sort of like everyone kind of knowing what tasks need to happen to make everything run, and then making sure that folks are stepping up to do those, and if they're not, discussing what's happening and what needs to happen. So I feel like at the moment with Edinburgh Indie Gamers, we've got like a core of about like 5 of us who are like kind of dedicated to making sure all the essential tasks get done, but we don't do it in private and away from people. We do it, we've got like a channel on our Discord where we talk about like openly what's going on, and we try and make sure that other people are getting involved, and we've had a lot of success.
And literally anyone who has attended a club is able to see all the minutes and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And even folks, we've got someone who's just joined our server recently who hasn't been to an in-person meeting. I don't think they've actually been to one of our games yet, and they're already helping us finding venues. So, nice. So, I like the idea that that this person who's just came in and noticed that we're in the middle of trying to find a new venue because our old venue is closed down because of the pandemic, is already sort of pitching in because they have some skill and interest and knowledge. And I feel like that's how a good club runs, that people sort of pitch in what they are able to, and when they aren't able to, there's no expectation put upon them, that we let people disengage or get away. I feel like that works in terms of the way I run games at my table, and the way the club runs is sometimes someone doesn't feel in the mood, and so you can't...
Like, there'll be other people to step up. Like, everyone understands, as you say, this is what needs to happen. And I've actually talked with one person about restarting London Waterloo playtests, where we used to, back in the day, when I say back in the day, this was, what month is it? May, February, March, April, May. So about 15 months ago. We used to meet up every Friday, and I think we met up maybe 50 Fridays a year. So there were 2 Fridays, I think, around New Year and Christmas where it was actually closed. But hey, even if some people are away, there's other people who are keeping it going. And I was a regular, David Brain was a regular, but then more and more people, as you go there more and more, you start to learn what becomes expected of you. And for me, just like you're talking about people learning what needs to be done, that's basically what happens. And for sure, there was a lot of kind of logical enforcements of stuff, and a lot of it was down to me dictating stuff at the start, not in a, hey, this is going to be very good for me, but more in a case of, hey, if you come to playtest for 90 minutes, you shouldn't be able to come playtest your game and then go off. You should, at least come and play other people's games first. And this has been because London, frankly, there have been a few instances of people just coming and saying, okay, I really want to try this game, or is that okay? And okay, and then, oh, but don't worry, I'll playtest everyone's games another day. And then they're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that my game was so far away from being a good game. And then I see them like at a normal games club, like sometime later, and oh, have you thought about coming back? Because you said you were going to come back and help playtest everyone else's. And they're like, oh, no, my game isn't good enough to come back yet. And I try to explain, well, everyone spent the time helping you, and so it would be nice to kind of give that time back, because that's how these things work. Obviously, this is a different scenario. This is where it's designers kind of doing things as opposed, and everyone kind of wants their game to be tested a wee bit. Like, yes, sure, there might be 5% of people who just turn up to play, which is super amazing. But in your scenario, there are some people who are happy being GMs all the time. Some people who are, I guess, happy facilitating games all the time. Some people who are happy just playing games all the time. And but
it does mix up. I think the example you're giving, I think it's quite. It isn't an authoritarian move to say this is the structure of this club at the outset, and if you want to come in and associate with this club, this is how to do it. So when you come for the first time, you'll be playtesting someone else, and then later on you can maybe put your own into the list of stuff we're going to be playing. That's cool, because that's a structure that I can then, as someone coming to your club, can decide, do I want to actually participate in that, or do I want to stay away? That's fine. I've got that freedom. Within Edinburgh Indie Gamers, we actually had a bit of a sort of a point about a year and a half ago, where Dave Walker, who's one of the sort of like, it'd been a sort of linchpin for the club for a while, was starting to get really worn out. He realised he'd been running games for about 15 months, like of meetings twice a month, and he'd been the one 90% of the time facilitating stuff. And I think Steve Hanlon as well, they'd been both like the facilitators of games for about at least a year. And so this sort of like call went out on the social media saying, like, I can't carry on doing this. I need to step back from this. Who can step up? And I think that was a big wake-up call for the club. I just joined at that point. So I'd been in Edinburgh a wee while, but I'd had a big whoops in my life and lost my home and all my possessions to a tragic accident. And so I'd not really got along to the indie gamers here, even though I was like super keen to do so. And then I just started getting involved with it. And then, I stepped up, another few other people at the club stepped up. And then that meant that the sort of responsibilities were being better distributed, were being passed around, and that newer people coming into the club have been running games and taking on like different responsibilities or different little tasks as and when they're needed. And so it's become a lot more fairly distributed, and a bit more sort of it's become less of a sort of
interesting one, because sometimes it's that other people don't want to do it. sometimes it's that the other people don't realize that it's an issue. Sometimes it's that the other people maybe even want to do it, but then they don't realize that they're maybe a bit afraid of stepping up and facilitating. Because I've been in so many places where so many times, yeah, I think I actually for a while had this house as a proper public thing. So I didn't put the address on the internet, but I said on meetup.com I had a thing, and then I stopped it because I wasn't getting enough vote. But I basically said, if you want to join us, then direct message me and I'll send you the address. I mean, as long as they aren't a complete numpty, and I like will just kind of pass a couple of messages and it's okay, cool. Here's the address. And I met a couple of strangers through that who are now people that I've seen a few times, and a couple of folk who came, they were like, hey, do you want me to bring a game? Are you okay us playing your games and you teaching it? And I'm like, yes, absolutely, 100%. I want people playing my games because I've got like 300 games and most of them I still haven't played, you know.
The first time.
Like,
that's
actually,
how Glasgow
many have I not played
started.
at all?
Huh?
Like, yeah, they're not most of them I haven't played, but a good, like, at least 50 I've not even played once, and that's a bit sad. That is partially because some of the games, like, I just bought because they were cheap, and it's like, hey, let's try these. But, you know, I want to try all these things, and some of them I'm really excited to try, and I've just not played as much as I want. But, yeah, that's the thing. But talking more about Glasgow, Edinburgh, indie gamers, what makes that special to you?
What you said there was perfect, because about just over 10 years ago, I was sat with a big pile of small press and indie games, and it was growing and growing and growing. And I was attending other clubs locally, but I was finding that there was maybe one or two people at each club, or there were people I was hearing about at different parts of Glasgow that were interested in playing sort of these games that deal in specific specialized themes, that weren't just like heroic fantasy or sort of like heroic games or big Marvel movie style sort of games. And so I literally just started, I put up some Facebook page or group or something, and a couple other sort of social media, and then I just advertised it at every club I knew, in gaming shops, and then turned up to the pub with this pile of books and put it down and got people in. And the first night was really successful. I used a bunch of, I made sure it was really low energy for me to organize. It was really like casual for people to come into. And I was lucky enough to hook in a few of the like local game designers at the time. They still are local Scottish games designers, and they came through and were just like, as people were sort of flicking through books and chatting, as soon as folks were interested, folks were like, some of the designers were like, would you like to play that? Let's play it. Come over here. Let's come to this table and just play for a wee half hour, 45 minutes, hour demo of this game. Let's play it, see what it's like. And so games sort of spontaneously sprung up, but like most spontaneity, it was organized in a way that the sort of fertile soil had been laid out for the seeds to take root, and it just carried on from there. And so that sort of space where you can sort of like try out games and play games that are like, that you have a real interest in, and that you can find other people that will have that same interest. And I guess with Edinburgh indie gamers, it's been really important over the past, over a year now with the pandemic. We'd already just set up a Discord server, but a lot of people weren't on it. I don't think I was on it at first because I didn't really use Discord. But then the second the pandemic
happened, yeah.
Yeah, but it meant that a lot of us were talking a lot more frequently. We were using it to sort of support one another and help one another on a sort of like a more personal level. Like seeing each other twice a month at a club was good, and you'd start to like grow friendships slowly. but having and the Facebook group didn't have the same sort of chat. It just wasn't the same environment as sort of like having a sort of chat feed that you were all sort of talking within and different channels. And so over the past year, the club just sort of, I think a lot of us became closer as friends, and we were reaching out to one another, and we were gaming far more often. Like, it was far easier for us to make make games, because we could just go from having our dinner at home to the PC. And yeah.
And I think that RPGs have actually adapted quite well to the online-only environment, because they are very conversational. Whereas games that are a little bit more about the physical components, like, you know, there's no way that I'm going to play Jenga online, as an extreme example. You know, similarly, a game which I actually quite enjoy, Twin It, which I quite enjoy, you know, you can't play that. You can't, like, slap your fingers. But even, like, the joy of a deck builder, okay, some people don't like the shuffling. That's maybe a bad example. But even the joy of a worker placements, where you take your little meeple and then you put it down on a spot, and it's, boom, I've got that spot. And then you can look around the board easily. When you try to translate that into a 3D environment, it becomes too difficult to navigate. And when you put it onto Board Game Arena, I actually prefer Board Game Arena to the 3D ones, but then it's just, yeah. Now, we've got I was just going to say, we've got a wee question from Bones and Banners. So a quick hello. Thank you for joining us, of course, as always. It's lovely to see you. And Bones and Banners had a question for both of us. Do you playtest the same games over and over on your designer playtest meetups? I feel I don't want to bother people too much, too many times. I mean, over time, I don't feel I want to bring the same game every week. And regarding in London, back when we were doing it, there were a couple of nice things. Firstly, there were always at least enough people for 2 groups. If we had like 6 people, then as long as your game can take, some games can take 2 players minimum, some games can take 3 players. It's like, if your game takes 5 players, that's a bit of a big ask. And we wouldn't really even let you play that, because by rights, we've got 3 slots, and so it's like 11 till 12:30, 1 till 2:30, and 3 till 4:30. But we encourage people to be there at 10 for the pre-official start conversation, where we grab the tables. Being there early is obviously a good thing, because then we can grab the tables, and then also we just chat and we get to know each other, which is really nice. But if your game does take you plus 2 others, then by rights, okay, you can play in 2 other people's things, and then 2 other people, not necessarily the same 2 people, are playing in your thing, and it's fine. Now, not everyone is going to be playing your game every week, because if we've got 6 players, you know, maybe half of them are going to be playing it each week. The other thing to bear in mind is gauge it based on the people. If people start saying, oh, the same thing again, because we actually say, hey, these are the games, pitch the games, go to your tables, and then people start going to the tables. Paul always gets first choice, because Paul just comes to playtest and doesn't normally bring their own games. So we just say, if you're coming and you don't have your own game, you get first choice of which game you want. That's just the thing. And then every other designer then kind of fills it. And it's like, okay, Ellie Dix, people always used to go to Ellie Dix's thing. Ding, David King, people like it, because it's always different. And then the same game, some people mutate it so much from one week to the next. And I was bringing Kitty Cataclysm so many times, like with very small changes. I brought it like so many weeks where it was like, okay, I've changed this one number. Okay, I've changed this like one number. And like, it's a game that I would get people to play maybe 10 times over the course of an hour and a half. But it was a good enough game that people had played it literally hundreds of times and were still keen to play it, which is a good sign. And in a sense, that's a good test for not only the game itself, but does that game have longevity? Because if you don't want someone to play your game, if someone doesn't want to play your game 3 times over the course of 3 weeks, frankly, I know this sounds harsh, but maybe it's not a great game. And
or it has a very niche appeal.
yeah, maybe it has a niche appeal. Maybe it's the wrong audience. Maybe it's a type of game that you only want to play once. I don't know. But you've got to ask yourself why. And yeah, obviously, as Alex says, this is thanks to the size of our group. But Tanya, going back to Edinburgh Indie Gamers and Glasgow Indie Gamers, if a designer was to come in with a brand new game, firstly, how would you approach that? Are you open to designers doing that? And secondly, is it okay for someone to keep bringing the same game? At what point do you say, oh, you're bringing this too many times? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so our open Saturday meetings are twice a month. And we've been doing those online, obviously, the last year, but before it would be in person. And hopefully will be again soon. But the notion of that is that we don't really, there's not as much pre-planning. And it's more about turning up with games and making a pitch and then splitting up. And there's a notion that if you've played, that they're going to be one-shots, so it's not for campaign or even several sessions. And if something runs over a single session, you could arrange to play outside those open Saturdays. And I know I've done this through the club a lot of the time. Rather than like take my game to an open Saturday directly, I've made my, like if it's a one-shot game, I've made it like a backup game. Like if nothing else is happening or there's more people than we expect, then I'm ready to step in with it. Or the club, you can be part of the club and use the club space to arrange games that aren't on those two nights. And so I do that quite frequently with my own designs, and other people have done it, and other people have designed games that they've then ran at the club. And yeah, we're open to designers coming. But if someone turned up every open Saturday saying, I'm only just going to run my game, I think they'd very quickly just find nobody was playing it. So, but I just don't see that happening. I don't think that it could happen, but it's never happened that I'm aware of. And I kind of feel like there's a lot of people at the club design their own games, a lot. It just sort of, the space seems to help people sort of get support and get help on that. So, and I don't see any problems with it.
So on a Saturday, let's talk about this a wee bit more. Like just actually do a proper pitch for it. Like people who watch this aren't going to be based in Edinburgh, but if someone were somehow listening to this, or maybe they're venturing to Edinburgh at some point in the future, and they fancy doing a wee bits of role playing while they're up there, what days do you run, and what exactly happens? So the open Saturday, is that just one game session, and that's the entire thing?
So we run that on the evening of the 2nd and 4th Saturday of every month. When we were running in person, we had a bar that we'd go to that would be a venue. We do similar to what you were mentioning there, Bez, of we'll get there early and grab the tables. But we're currently looking about for a better venue space for once we come out of the various stages of lockdown. But you turn up, people can bring along their own games. People, like there'd be a few of us that will always sort of have a game on the back burner in case no one else turns up with games. So we'll normally talk in advance on our Discord about, I'll bring along this game, although it's not like you have to play this game. We just sort of say this game's definitely going to be on, and if folks are interested, then get on board. And then on the night, it's like we sit down, we have a little chat before gaming starts. We sort of see how many people there are, work out roughly how many groups that would be, depending on what games people were pitching. And then at about maybe 7:30 in the evening, we split off into our groups. We play until about 10:30, and then that's the evening. So you don't have to turn up with any knowledge, it's very beginner friendly. It's like, which of these games that people are talking about do you like the sound of? Like, going back to the cats sheet we were describing, like which of these sort of styles of game, what sort of concepts, what sort of ideas, what sort of setting, what thing is hooking you. Go play the thing that's hooking you, and then enjoy it and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, have a wee chat in the bar afterwards about it, or chat online about it, or whatever.
So I guess when there's just one game that you get to play and then you've got to go home, there's maybe a lots of pressure for that one game, and it has to be quite good. Whereas, but let's have some. Obviously, you maybe haven't set up like you talked about going to school and there was one and you went to uni and there was already one, and then you didn't set up any of the game clubs later in your life, but you have started to manage them. But back when you did set up your first one, ages ago, do you have, like, from what you've seen, if someone's in a place where there isn't a games club to go to and they want to start one up themselves, do you have any advice?
Yeah, I've got I've got a whole essay of advice actually in our zine that's coming out, and it'll be up online tomorrow. So there's a link there. But the main thing I would say is, unless you're a student or academic yourself, a lot of people think that you have to set up in a student sort of campus. There's a lot of games clubs sort of run out of those, and I feel like you can actually avoid that, because that can be quite off-putting to people because of the sort of air. Like, universities like to build up an air of otherness, and so find what's accessible to you and people around you at first, and think about who isn't able to access those spaces, and maybe always try to move to be more inclusive. So, like, when I started Glasgow Indie Gamers, it was a case of we picked somewhere that was very close to where I lived and where the other people who I knew were initially interested lived. It was on good transport links, so that people who were maybe in other parts of the city or from outside of Glasgow were able to get to it. And we done it in a way that would be quite low expectation in terms of the sort of economic sort of. There wasn't any club fees or like anything else, and we made sure there was a wee kitty for transport and a wee kitty for getting people a drink if they turned up, because someone could turn up and then, like, if you're on the dole or you're on a low wage, you don't want to have to turn up to a bar and then have to pay like even for a can of cola like several quid or something. Like, as long as we've got something set up that we could help people, like that, and it wasn't seen as you have to apply to it. It's just like people coming in, well, I still, do you want to get, would you like us to get you a drink, blah blah blah, and just a little small things like that, just small considerations, but make it low impact and low energy, and don't set your goals. Like, have in mind that you might want this club to run for years and have these big ideas about where it could go, but also set your sort of like bar for what you consider success quite low. Like when I set up Glasgow Indie Gamers, my success rate was I meet a few other people who might be interested in one of these games I haven't played yet, and if we can get together and play one of those games, then it folds, then it's our success. And everything on top of that means that you sort of like, Glasgow Indie Gamers eventually folded because a lot of us scattered to the four winds. So yeah, the idea that becomes a whole thing, just to have that sort of, it was a successful endeavour and it still lives on in other games clubs that exist further down the family tree.
I think it's a really important point what you said about making that measure of success as low as you can. And when I was setting up a design club, okay, so there were already things in London. When I arrived in London, I can't remember now, it was around 10 years ago. And I think that there were two things a month. One was at the Drugged Hare every something of Sunday, and one was something that someone else had started, and the other thing that someone else had started wasn't quite as well organized. And I think like the first 4 times I went. The main person who'd set it up was there like once, and people were maybe a wee bit confused as to what was going on, and also given a maybe a very warm reception. But you know, I got my thing played. It was fine, and I played other things, but it felt whereas Rob Harris has kind of set up this thing, and you do need someone to be the like, okay, I have some passion to keep this going. Now, anyway, after that, you know, it started becoming more and more regular. And at a certain point, I was like thinking, hey, maybe we should do a daytime thing, because yes, there's a weekend thing. Yes, there's now an evening thing that Rob started. But maybe there are other people who don't work every daytime. Maybe some people, like when I was working retail, weekends and evenings were frankly the times when I was most likely to be working. And so it's not the best thing. And so why not have a daytime thing? Hunting around for places and thinking, okay, what is the lowest form of success? Thinking, okay, as long as we make 2-player games, as long as we design 2-player games, all we need is 2 people to come to the place. And then I can play their game, they can play my game, and then, you know, we might go home, and then like if someone else comes along and there's 3 of us, it won't be like, oh, it'll feel like, oh, there's 3, there's actually a bit of a group here. And, you know, there were enough people, like the fact that someone, you know, Drew messaged me on Facebook just a wee bit ago to say, hey, when can we start this? And I was like, that's an interesting question. Maybe 18th June? How does that sound? And Drew was, yeah, that sounds great. And then I'm going to like speak to Dave. Again, as long as at least 2 of us are there, that's the thing. Like, if you make a game that is playable with 2 people, or if you are willing to play games, obviously for maybe role-playing, this is a bit more difficult because you don't have that. But there are 2-player role-playing games. And if you're willing to do that, then frankly, there's 1-player role-playing games. I don't know if you particularly want to do a club where you just go into the bar on your own. That feels a bit pointless. But
you know, sometimes you just have. What is it? If you build it, they will come. You have to just be there sometimes, and a little bit.
Like I saw this research. Like I think it was actually a TED talk where someone said, "Hey, here's a video of a crazy dancer." And it was like at a music festival. Someone was being a bit. You might call them a wee bit of an umpty. You might call them just having a wee bit jolly. Anyway, so they were just getting into the middle of like a bunch of people sitting around having a bit of a picnic, and then suddenly someone goes up, takes their shirts off, and starts dancing. And then the person says, "Now this is important." That person, yes, they set the tone, but they are not the most important thing, because look, at like a long time, then the second person comes, and once the second person comes and gives it validity, then person 3, 4, 5, like it was a massive rush. And I think even that second person is enough to give it social validation.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're just going along to a bar by yourself every month, then that's going to be the end of that. But yeah, but I do think there's some validity in sort of just giving it a shot and having a low bar, and if you get something out of it, then take it as a success, and then learn for the next time.
Now, of course, Edinburgh Indie Gamers, you mentioned, has actually done a zine. And this is you've done a zine in the past. I should have actually put this into a separate thing. Sorry. There we go. That's the other one. So this is your previous one that you did 100 pages, and it was basically hand done. But I heard you mention that this new one is actually going to be professionally printed. Is that?
Not really. It's being done. We're sending it off to printmakers, and it's now in my hands, and it's in the hands of backers now. We're seeing lots of people.
I mean, you paid some people, and they made it for you. That's professionally printed.
Fair enough. Okay. I've done that a lot in my lifetime. So
show it again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is the Edinburgh Indie Gamers zine. We've put 2021 because we might do it again in a year. We don't know. We're kind of, basically this came out of lockdown. This came out of that sort of like coming together online a lot more, gaming together a lot more, getting to know each other a lot more. And we were all getting excited about Kickstarter run a promotion every February for the past 3 years called Zine Quest. And what they encourage is role-play game designers and game designers at large, tabletop game designers at large. So there's a few war games and miniature games go on there to write zines, like small magazines. Like they set out a rough parameter that should only be in like one color of printing. It should have a maximum size, certain types of binding, like staple bound, that kind of thing, or saddle stitched. And so we've been getting ready for that. Like there've been a bit of chat about, do people know what's coming up for it? Is anyone here making something for it? And like I think I'd suggested, why don't we make a zine for Zine Quest? Because we've got so much talent at our club. We've got so many people who are coming out with really interesting stuff. And so there was a bit of chat about how we would go about that, which tasks we would do. So it's very much like the organisation of the club, but on a specific task. Like people with specific talents or specific ideas would come up and put that in. So James Harding, who's one of the founders of the club, is an amazing layout designer, and so did the layout for the zine. Also contributed one of his games to the zine. We had other people at the club, Jane Ditchfield and Gregor Hutton, both submitted games. We had Dave Walker gave a really brilliant, ended up being a brilliant, it changed slightly from the original pitch to, basically it's called Asking Questions. It's a brilliant sort of GMing advice column.
Sharing the cognitive load and being a more inclusive GM.
Yeah. So we sort of went for that. There's Gertie from the Geek Native blog gave his top 10 for the past year. We had Caroline Walker do a load of the internal art on it. And we had Daru McAleese do 2 poems, wrote 2 poems for the zine, which both bookend the volume. And some random tables, how to start a club article by myself, and a sort of like tongue-in-cheek comedy article about called the Indie Police, which is about some of those discussions you can see on pointless discussions you see online about what is and isn't indie, and how if taken to their logical conclusion they can be a little bit silly. So yeah, and we had a lot of fun making it. Everyone pitched in. I dealt with the Kickstarter side of it and with the printing and the distribution. Because I've got a lot of experience. I used to help out with anarchist zine distros and political organizations making pamphlets and zines. So yeah, it's a really good piece. I think it's one of the. I actually think it's probably the best value piece from this year's Zine Quest, because we kept the price point really low, and the PDF we're making available for free. So it's going out tomorrow. I think you've posted the link for that. It's going to be on itch.io. And we actually, as part of the fundraising, had a community copy level where a lot of games these days offer community copies, which are like free PDFs for people who have low wages or would come from a group normally excluded from gaming spaces, or marginalized within them, or that are unwaged on the dole. And so what we've done there is, rather than make it a free PDF, we're giving everybody the PDF for free, and if anyone wants a physical copy, we'll send it out to them if they couldn't get in on the actual Kickstarter. And Brooks Press, who are a gaming zine
that's
distributor.
really nice.
Oh yeah.
And if you go to the Kickstarter, you can click on the free PDF coming soon, and then it will be coming soon.
Tomorrow. Tomorrow will be the 5-year anniversary of the first Open Saturday, or the I think Saturday's technically it, but if you want, depending on how you count the days, it'll be the Saturday coming will be the 5-year anniversary. So we're releasing it just in advance of that. So yeah.
So basically, if you go on any time on Saturday, even if it's like 1 minute past midnight, it'll already be there on Saturday.
Yeah, it should be there. Yeah, definitely. And
that's really exciting, and that's a really nice thing. I've seen some other people do similar things. Like I was inspired by some people who said, okay, pay extra for a copy of a game and we'll give it to libraries or whatever. And I actually did something similar for Categorical. I think I said, a copy for you. And then I had like, I can't remember what I called it, but it was like basically a copy for you and a copy for someone you don't know, but it'll go to a school and I'll donate at least, I'll probably end up donating, you know, more than that many, but like it'll be at least that many. I'll find, you know, good homes for somehow, whether that's via schools or teachers or whatever, trying to find people who are doing social good and saying, hey, you know, you can get this. And yeah, within the UK might even, yeah, if it's in London, if it's a teacher, I might go and make sure that they know how to play and make good use of it. If it's in a club, I could, you know, go and help them use it. And if it's, you know, in the UK, just post it over, which will be easy. Whereas I'm going to, for cost reasons, avoid, you know, sending them out internationally. Again, blame Brexit. A year ago, I would have been like, yeah, fine, France, Germany, that's fine. An RPG I backed in the US said they'd gift you your physical copy if they want. They didn't ship outside the US, says Xenofuel. That sounds quite cool. And while I'm stretching, as Stream Elements always reminds me to every 37 minutes, can you tell me how you decide who to give the community copies to?
Yeah, well, basically just ask. If you message us and say, I'd like a community copy, we don't ask any questions about why you want it. We just send it out. So it's purely on an honor-based system, trust system. The rough rule of thumb that we say is if you're like in a way that you couldn't afford picking up a game yourself at the moment, or you've had some life difficulties, or like you're on a low wage or no income, yeah, definitely grab one. But if you want one for your club to share amongst multiple people, or sort of like in a sort of, you want to grab an extra copy to pass it out to people, like, it's entirely up to yourself. We don't ask why you need the copy or what it's for. We just sort of say it's a community copy, so try and work with the spirit of that. So yeah.
It seems very much in the spirit of what the Edinburgh Indie Gamers is all about, kind of trusting people to do the right thing. And like, it's a weird one, like this whole notion of trusting people to do the right thing, because I know when we started, like, again, the daytime playtest, we had a very structured system of points. And for a while, like, David, Brain, and I were manually tracking points in a big spreadsheet where it was literally every time you play a game, you get this many points. If you're, you know, playtesting one of your games, then you kind of spend this many points relative to how many people you needed to play it. And there's also a bonus if you're there at the start, because like every so often we're like, hey, how shall we change these points? Okay, how shall we change these points now? And honestly, like, those points were partially from my possibly autistic brain. I've not been diagnosed or anything. I just definitely have a lot of tendencies, and when I've looked online, it's like, yeah, I've got a high likelihood of being autistic, but I don't feel. But I use that as a shorthand of saying I fit that kind of. I am very logical. I like clear instructions. I very much dislike it. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to be play acting when it's like, okay, anything you do is fine. If it's like, okay, literally, so if I kill the king, that's fine. If I make outs with the king, that's fine. If that's genuinely the case, then great. And we'll kind of have a bit of fun together, and we'll kind of, I might not do either of those things. I might actually complete the king's quest. I don't know, but well, like whatever feels appropriate at the time. But for sure, I'm not completely insensitive and unable to read people's feelings, but I do really appreciate that clarity. But then that came from a point of, frankly, some people arguably having abused it in the evening one, where there was one person who said, oh, well, I only played my game once and we played 10 of your games. Why can't I play my game again? It's like, yes, but your game needed 6 people and it took us 3 hours to play your game. Whereas my games, they've taken us about 10 minutes each. And we've had like 2 or 3 people for these games. It's really not the same.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think with the zine, it's a slightly different beast in the sense that if someone messages us that's a multi-millionaire to take a community copy, it's like, what have they got? They've got a zine. Like it's a whole different sort of pitch.
Yeah. Sorry, you're kind of tapping it. I'm terrible at going off on
it's interesting that we've got like. I guess that we have to, if something like that were to come up here, we'd have to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis, wouldn't we? If someone was turning up to indie gamers and always wanting to play their game and getting quite huffy if they couldn't, or like getting annoyed that we were picking other games, like I guess it's the sort of social bonds there would have to come into play and sort of discuss it out and find out what was happening. So yeah, it's a whole interesting to hear the differences and sort of approaches that are needed for these different circumstances.
I mean, it might be because London is such a big city. There's going to be people passing through. There's been at least like in the past, in 2020 alone, and bear in mind that we were only running for like January, February, March, I'm sure there were at least like 4 people who came from, more than 20 miles away, because, there's good train links to Waterloo, and so someone comes from Reading, and, someone comes from South, what's that place on the south that's near Brighton? The other place that's on the south coast. Anyway, someone came from that place and they were like, hey, I'm coming for the day. And then Matthew Dunstan, was Matthew Dunstan in 2020 or 2019? When did I last see Matthew? I can't remember. I definitely saw Matthew in Germany. Anyway, the point is that people come from out of town, but also there's these transient folk, because it's such a populous city that we do try to advertise it and we do say this is what it is, and then we get people who are kind of coming, not really becoming part of the group. And that can really, I guess with your thing, it's less of a pressure of, I want to play my game all the time. And so it feels like there's less of a, I want to play my game. No, I want to play my game. It's like, hey, I want to play my game. Cool. I don't feel like facilitating a game today. Great.
Yeah.
Let's play my game, and it might not be the greatest game, but hopefully that's okay with everyone. Hey, that's cool.
We've played some stinkers. It happens. Like some games just don't, like we've played some games and we kind of done that whole, we see what was going on there, but it didn't quite gel for us. It might be us as a group, or just it wasn't quite. It didn't develop. It was. It was one game, I won't name names, it just felt like if the designer had been running it with us, it would have ran a lot better than us trying to run it based on what the designer had wrote down. And so getting that
maybe
feel,
the written directions weren't so good.
Yeah, or it just didn't seem to hit the same notes that we were expecting based on what was said up front. And that can happen. That can happen with any game. You buy a game, you try it out, and it doesn't work the way you hoped. and so we just try and make best out of it. And like we have a very sort of we operate like an open table policy where you can get up and leave tables for any reason at any time without question. We use a lot of different safety mechanics because you could be playing with strangers or people that you don't know that well, or that you could be playing using games that like could invoke sort of topics and feelings and themes that people find difficult to handle, or that could be quite upsetting sometimes. That we use things like, I know that sort of lines and veils and X cards, these sorts of safety mechanics, and some other ones, if you've heard of them.
And these are all basically guided. I've heard of them, but for those who don't know, they're basically formalized methods of communication to say, this is something I don't want to be in this game, or this is something I want a bit less of.
Yeah, and so using safety mechanisms at the table, rather than, I think there's a worry from some people that, oh my God, this is going to limit what we can do, and it's going to crimp the game and make it really, it's going to child-proof it or something. And I find it's the complete opposite is taken effect. That by using things, having mechanisms and drawing our magic circle around the game, so that we can feel confident that we've heard one another about what we're comfortable with in the game, that you can take the game far closer to the bone, that you can go into topic realms that you know are on the table, things that people will explore even if they're difficult, and you can really go into that. And so I've had some really great experiences even over the last year playing online with games with like there's one game where I was running for one person I knew but not very well at the club, and one person who was new to the club, and we were able to go into some real depth. It was really sort of emotional depth about like issues of identity, and it got very much like the film The Machinist, or like Fight Club, I guess, or something like that, where there was just this sort of like great tension and sort of like confusion over the narrative that was intentional, and it was non-linear, and it was surreal, and the matters of identity and who was playing which character even started to blur a lot. And
that was all facilitated partially because people knew that there are things that are not okay, but these things are okay. Therefore, we don't have to draw a veil around them, which means kind of exploring them off camera. We are actually free to explore these things in depth.
Yeah, and there's this idea of an X card or some other mechanism you can use to that any time something goes into somewhere that suddenly is really uncomfortable, like you won't be able to game, and you're feeling like you have to move away, that you can bring that up, and we will just pause the game, rewind it slightly, take a breather, and get back into it. Or the idea of an open table where if something is too much, maybe you can just get up and leave. Or if you just need to stretch your legs, like a lot of the safety mechanics as well don't have to be used for their most extreme cases. I've been at indie gamers where the X card was used because someone just didn't like a topic. They just didn't like it. They just thought, this is going to bore me. If we take the story in this direction, I'm going to lose. I'm not going to be as engaged in the story. And so can we take a moment?
And that's fine. Like frankly, if you sit down for a game and you know that the topic is all about horticulture, and then you draw an X card over flowers, that was a really kind of bad move, because again, it's about expectations. You've got to sit down at the correct game. But then if you have a game about horticulture, that doesn't mean that there have to be spiders. Like if someone has arachnophobia, then can you still have an interesting game about horticulture? Yeah, like if it was such an integral part of your game, you should have put it in that. What was the C again?
The concept.
Concept. Thank you. Yeah, it should have been in the concept.
Yeah, and along with that as well, like I've really been inspired. Dave Walker at the club, who wrote the GMing advice article in the Zine, he has a standing line, which is "This will never happen at the game," and through what he calls sneaky Cthulhu. And I'd had an experience before I came across this, where I was playing Fiasco, which is a game sort of like, it emulates that sort of like people with poor impulse control that you get in Coen Brothers movies. So like Fargo or something, and it has these sort of escalating flashpoints. And we were playing it, and it was set in Antarctica, and we were in this sort of hijinks, and then one of the characters brought up, and it wasn't any of the elements of play, but brought up having this sort of like Cthulhu statue, and then suddenly brought in all these elements that they were a cultist and all this. And so what they really wanted to play was Call of Cthulhu, okay, and have a Lovecraftian horror aspect. But the play set we were playing in was nothing to do with Lovecraftian horror. It was meant to be about people isolated at McMurdo Station and having sort of like there's maybe some a big bag of money in somebody's duffel bag, and nobody knows what that's about, and there's a sort of knife with blood on it somewhere else, and it like being tense. Oh, you're muted, Bez.
The point being that you can use these safety mechanisms. Yes, you can use them for safety, but they're also communication devices, and you can use them to talk about what you want from the game and say, actually, this thing is going to bore me. No, I do not want Cthulhu in my game. I'm a bit tired of having Cthulhu everywhere. Or maybe you are really triggered because H.P. Lovecraft was not a fine fellow.
Yeah, massive racist. Hands down. Yeah. But like that's exactly it. That we just, if you just want something, and I think that's one of the great things about our sort of like the club culture that we've got going on with Edinburgh Indie Gamers. Something that I'd love to see other clubs sort of develop, and I think it has been developing over the past 10 years. And there's been a sort of like a little bit of reactionary like backslide, especially online, to oh my god, safety mechanisms and all this. But new published games in the sort of like mainstream areas, you're starting to see them become front and center, become integrated in, because they do just make for better communication at the table. They make for better games, and ultimately roleplay gaming is about having a conversation. It's at least in multiplayer games, and a single player games, I guess you're having a conversation with yourself. You're journaling or creating the story yourself and using the mechanisms to guide that. But when you're playing with more people, you've got a conversation that's happening in the game itself, whether that's the background that's been written with it, or the mechanics, or anything to do with that game, that's there to help shape your conversation. And so the safety mechanics, as they're called, they're there as well to help shape that conversation. I think of it like drawing a magic circle around you, that you're sort of like investing in this shared space where you're going to be both playing a game, creating a story, sharing a narrative, sharing an experience, weaving magic. And that's, I think it helps.
That's a lovely way to put it. Let's get back to the zines, because so you created a zine, and I want to ask firstly, okay, so I'm just going to, I've not talked about this before, in like 800 something hours according to Twitch, and some number of 100 hours. I think it's actually 900 something hours according to Twitch. But anyway, so I did a fanzine called The Scrapbook, and I think I actually might have called it a reader zine for issue 2. I said, hey, a fanzine is made by fans, and this, I want it to be done by the readers. So like everyone submits articles and they go into like the zine, and I'll call it the reader zine. And it's like I had the Scrapbook, the intro, and then the Scrapbook World 1 Stage 1, and then World 1 Stage 2, and that was the end of it. Only 3 issues. But yeah, it was like a bunch of pages printed and then stapled, and it was A4. It didn't look great, but it was literally, I mean, your thing. So I was only familiar with Zine Quest actually within the past year, and I think I might have heard about it, but it was actually like the Anna or Anne who writes for Tabletop Gaming Magazine. I'm sorry, I really can't remember their surname. But anyway, so they did a couple of things for that. So I was, oh, that seems really cool. And then, oh wow, there's all these. Oh my gosh, I missed the boats on all of these. Wow, there's like too much to look at. But anyway, I started thinking, actually, you inspired me very much. Like just hearing the interviews with, like, especially that in and
Yes,
a
indeed.
shout out to yes, indeed. I'm going to actually look onto Twitter unless you have a link to hand. I'll
not to hand, but Mark Shepherd over at Yes Indeed. Big shout out to Marks. They're really awesome, lovely person.
It just made me think, like, I want to do that. I want to make a zine. Maybe, and then I got thinking, I've got a few games that, you know, they're not RPGs, but they're kind of parlor games they could fit in that. And I thought, I could write things. I could write an article. But yeah, what would you... Firstly, let's start off with the tips. Let's be selfish. I want to hear the tips from you, for me, if I'm writing a zine. And hopefully other people will also benefit from it.
Yeah, do something you love and have passion for. Like, number one, like make it. The good thing about zines is you can make them. They're very much, you're not sort of like chained to commercial pressure in the same way. You're not chained to someone else's expectations. You can really try out stuff that's experimental or outside your comfort zone, or something that you've been really interested, or you can just really go into that sort of fanzine space of just being mega enthusiastic about this one thing that you really want to talk to about with the world, and you want to do it in a place that other people who want to see that will see it. So yeah, highly recommend going with your passion, going with your idea, and the fact, just give it a shot. Making a zine is it can be as simple as you make it by hand and then photocopy it. Like you can make on a few sheets of paper, photocopy them together and do it, and then get, if you want, don't even have to staple it, you can just shove it together and put it out there. So the sort of comparing that with the sort of old, like clubs used to make a lot more zines back in the day, and it's interesting to see that's sort of vanished a little bit, or at least it went a little bit more underground again, and now it's coming back out as a means to like a lot of games that you see come out, Zine Quest 1 and Zine Quest 2, you then see them getting a little bit of a following, and then you see the designers of them maybe expanding the game and then gaining more of a following, so that when they want to make the bigger version of the game, or they've got a new game that they want to try out, or they've got something a bit more like ambitious, it means that people can trust that they've got the chops to make it work. So there's a lot of things like that going on.
Can you show your thing again, just to show off the binding?
Oh yeah, binding's just a couple of staples. It's let me just open up, you'll see it. Staple bound.
How do you do that?
Well, this one was done by the print shop, so I didn't even have to do anything. So this is a
local print shop, and then you kind of find someone...
My first scene I did with a local print shop, but because of COVID, I did this one through Mixam, which is like an online print shop. You can go on there, set your parameters, and get a quote right away. But also, you could. Last time when I made the last one, I went into a local print shop to print up most, but to build it, I went into my local social centre, which is sort of like a little anarchist and space in Edinburgh, where they had a photocopier, and I was able to just pop some money in the tin and play with the photocopier for a day and get the sort of zine the way I wanted it. So I literally sat on the floor cutting up
staples aren't able to get so far into the middle. I mean, if you've just got a regular stapler at the house, you can't get it right into the middle.
No, you can buy extra long staplers, or you can, if you want to, you can dismantle it. Just unscrew the middle and give it a go. I've done that before. Yeah, you can. There's all sorts of different things you can do. You can also stitch. You can stitch up the sides, like sewing them, it's a possibility.
That's going to take a lot of work, though.
Yeah, there's a lot of work there. It depends what you want to go for. And if you look online, there's ways that you can actually take a single sheet of paper, make a line in the middle and cut it, and then fold it so it becomes a little A6 zine. Like there's...
Yeah, I've done that. Every Kickstarter that I've ever sent out, all the backers got this little A6 thing, which was basically a comic about the making of that thing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's so cute, and that's the sort of thing that, like, I think something like Zine Quest, or just making zines in general. Like, what makes a zine good is that sort of like the personal touch. What I love about the Edinburgh Indie Gamers zine is that I look at each article, and I because I know the people involved, I feel like it really communicates a lot about them as people in some ways, and about their talents and where they're coming from, at least in a gaming. The idea of role-play games, and like I read the poems in there and they really invoke the club in some ways, and I read the gaming advice by Dave, and it really sums up a lot of the sort of feel like that sort of advice has been born out of his experiences elsewhere, but also like at the club itself and how we game together. And so it's really lovely to see those things, and to see something. Like, there's a brilliant game in there that's like, it started off as almost as a round in a pub quiz, and it's turned into a whole game. It's called In the House Solo, and it's Jane's game about it's basically a spin on a certain Christmas film where a child is left in the house solo, and the damp rascals come in to try and to spoil Christmas. And so yeah, it's Home Alone, but with the serial numbers scratched off. But I think it's great. It's like a lot of
what
fun.
I'm hearing here is basically a plea to say, make more stuff, and you don't have to do it on a big print run. Just like do a few things, like cuts like 5, and just do 5 of them, and like
feel like
do single person ones, do a zine for a club. Like maybe what I'm hearing you saying is, Bez, you should do a zine for the daytime playtest group.
Yes, do it. If the people are there and you've got the will to do it, just do it. Like my success level is, I think, to print off a few of them would have cost like about 20 quid or something, like 15, 20 quid. I'm sure like I'd spend that on a game or
Can I
some
ask
other thing.
How much you spent production costs and how many you got?
Yeah, if you actually go into our Kickstarter, into the updates, any of the updates, go midway through the updates, they all have a link to how much we've spent, how much we raised, how much we spent. So like I've actually made that public information.
The Google spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's it. And it'll tell you what we've been spending. See?
So Kickstarter fees. Wow, this is amazing. This is so zine printing 219. How many did you get though?
How many was it? I want to say, let me just take a look. There should be another tab there with how many we've
fulfillment.
got. Yeah, have a look there. So
66.
I think we printed another 100 on top of that for having in local clubs. So I think it was about 200 or 300. Give me a second, I'll find out. Sorry about the clicks. I'll mute myself.
No, this is really impressive, because I've been told in the past that I sometimes share too much information, and I'm just going to once again link to this thing on all the places so that people can then go to Google spreadsheet. So we've got 1,230 approximately, £13 drop pledges, £60.80 payment processing fees. So yeah, about 10% you spend on the Kickstarter and processing fees. Rooks's Press, is that a sponsorship, I assume?
Yeah, so what's happening is Rooks Press is a local RPG and game zine distributor. They're not in Edinburgh, they're down in England. And Oz there basically contacted us. I was chatting with Oz about it, and Oz said, could we stock it? And we were like, well, we weren't planning on making it a retail thing. But he's like, yeah, but, well, if nobody else is having it, make sure there's somewhere can have it. And we're like, well, seeing as you mentioned it, give us 100 quid and we'll give you 20 copies. And that's how that was the agreement. So you can actually buy the zine. There'll be a small number. There'll be 20 of them are available from Oz over at Rook's Press. And so...
That seems like a really high retail trade price. So it was like
£5 a copy.
£4 per copy that they bought.
A £5 a copy, yeah, and then £5 for postage. So
£5 per copy. Yeah.
And so
so I guess people who were getting your things are getting like it. Because if Rook's Press is the shop, how much are they selling it on at?
I think Oz is going to sell it on at £10 a copy. And it's only 20 copies, and it's for people who feel that they don't want to take out the community fund, the sort of community copies, but want to get hold of the zine. And I think we're okay with that. We didn't run it as a commercial venture, if it had been like even a sort of more bricks and mortar game shop, we might like local game shops. We're putting piles of them in for free. So if you're in Edinburgh and you go into a games shop, there'll be a big pile of them that you can just pick up because we're using it locally as our sort of promotion material. But yeah, I've got a big box of them, like just stacked here. So once we've got the PDF out in the world, I'll be going about all the game shops and just plodding them in. But
so did you find out how many you printed?
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm not very good at this multitasking zine, so
that's totally fair.
It just says, I think we printed 230 copies, maybe 300, somewhere between 230 and 300. I can find a little bit of chat on it, but I can't see the final figure, and I don't want to go rummaging my emails.
That's totally
quite
fair
at the moment. But yeah.
So it was about £1 per copy, and then
something.
So nice stickers that you got. And what does Indie approved mean? I do apologise for not having done.
Well, we made some little round stickers as well to go with it that say Indie police approved product sort of thing, as to go with the joke article.
Okay.
Yeah. So we done that as a thing. We didn't advertise that in advance. We came up with it after we worked out that we had. So
that's a bonus sticker that people got.
Yeah, a few. We chucked a couple in with every envelope. Just as there's stuff in the envelopes, I just popped a few in and off they went to the world.
And then 342 for sending. Some postage that you've estimated that are awaiting addresses. Refund to the creative team, £1.
So everything on Kickstarter, there's a creative fund. No matter who sets up a Kickstarter project, they always put £1 in to every project. But I didn't think that we needed it. It's good for projects that are just coming in quite close to the line. Our project has made us cleared 500 quid, so I just hit the refund button on it because, like, some other fund, it can be useful for some other project that wouldn't get that. So,
and then you finished up with a total of 538 quid profit for the club, which is going to be spent on making it better. That's a really success. That seems like a really successfully run project. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. I do feel it's a big success. Like it isn't like one of these games that obviously people are buying in for a specific game, and so it's got this meteoric success. It's more about the fact that the zine itself is sort of like this collaborative effort, and it's more about supporting our community, and we're going to make it a lot more accessible for people coming to the club overall. That's really the goal. So I put out an update every 2 weeks, and I've got I'll put out one final update in about a week and a half's time, and then we're running a little showcase as a thank you to backers. So we've invited anyone in Scotland, sort of in the orbit of our club, is welcome to come along to it, and certain backers have been invited along to it, and you've been invited, Des, obviously, for helping us out with this spot today, and just being an all-round lovely person. And so we're doing a day on the 19th of June. We're going to do sort of like an afternoon and evening of games and workshops, and it's going to be like games by the designers that are in the zine.
And this is essentially the launch party that's originally, if you backed Fiverr, then you got the magazine, £8, and you got an invite to this party, plus a community copy, and then £10 got you all of that, plus the wee sticker.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So anyone from that community level up has been invited along, and it means that you can game with the actual designers that have made the games that we've sent out to you, and you can talk with some of the people like Daru, who wrote the poems in the zine, is a really accomplished poet and storyteller, and is going to be doing a storytelling and poetry workshop, which is really sort of collaborative and interactive. And so having that sort of space, we've also got a workshop. I'll do a workshop on setting up your own club, like tips and tricks and pitfalls. And there's a whole bunch of games that we're going to be playing, and some of them by most of them by local designers, with the designers themselves running it, but one or two just by club members who are playing games that they like. So it'll be like a slightly bigger version than our Open Saturday.
That sounds fantastic. And now I'm going to take a lot of inspiration maybe from how open you've been here, because I am thinking of doing some projects in a more punk rock manner, kind of, doing print-on-demand cards with someone that I know, Rob Butler, and getting them. So it's like, as long as I do 50 copies, that's enough. And if I can print more, then great, but like 50 copies is what I'm aiming to sell. And it's like, this is going to be a card game that doesn't come in a box. It's going to come in a little plastic baggie, just to minimize cost, because, the box is really, really expensive. So it's like, hey, you get these cards, it's a good game, I'm proud of it, but that's going to be it. And maybe I won't spend so much time. I'm going to do it as cheap as I can. And no, there are certain times when, honestly, like, once it's like, okay, I've spent this money for this, I've spent this money to go here, I've spent this money on this convention, and at a certain scale, you can't exactly say, this is the money for this project. How can I say, if I went to Essen, it's this percentage for this game, this percentage for this game? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at a kind of small scale where it's like, I just want to have something, and then like that's just actually having that sharing, this is the production cost, and inviting other people to do it, because I see this and I think, you know what, £200 to print that many, that's not that bad. I will check in with this website.
Our original goal was like, I think £100 to do everything we wanted to do. It was, and I think or £50-ish. It was very low. I think we worked out that if we just sat down and planned in advance.
I'm trying. It doesn't tell you on the main page anymore.
Okay. Oh well, it was around about £50 or something. I think was our initial ask for funding, and we blew through that in seconds. But the idea was, we've got this low pressure, like nobody's sort of like, there's a little bit of pressure to get things done on time, and a little bit of sort of like, I had to herd some kittens and just check in with people and make sure things are ticking over, but doing things in a way that it doesn't burn you out. And the thing that you're saying there with your own stuff, Bez, is you can maybe throw out a few ideas that don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be.
That's the thing.
have to work, they have to be enjoyable, and you have to be happy with them. But
yeah, there has to be a certain quality
Yeah.
threshold. I don't want to, and it does reflect upon you. But at the same time, someone understands that if I'm doing like a busy budget bag, then, you know, I'm going to spend a wee bit less time on writing out and laying out the rules and drawing all the stuff compared to something where it's, okay, you know, full price.
One of the lovely things I've seen on, like, with creators on Itch is that they've been doing this sort of like, here's the beta version, or here's a budget version of my game that you can get for $5 right now. Well, I still feel like I think it's playable, but it's not quite 100% yet. But what they do is they say when I release, if I get round to releasing my full game, or I go to Kickstarter, or I'll go to a big publishing run and get a nice hardback book or what have you, because you bought this early on, you'll get like a £5 off voucher on the final product, or something similar, you know, like I'll give you a discount. And that sort of like idea of like bringing people into the sort of production process, or being really transparent about what you're doing. Because I find that just being honest, like Kickstarters and other projects where you maybe have thrown some money into and then they go silent are really the worst. Whereas if somebody's just every few weeks reminding you what's going on, even if they're running a bit late, you can be quite forgiving about it, because you kind of know what's happening.
I think that's a big thing, and I continually think I'm sometimes good, and people say that I'm good, but I don't think I'm good enough. Like, I feel like I'm not a very good person at doing something regularly. I say this as someone who's been like doing 386 morning streams in the past like 391 days, but you know, but like this is different because like there's an imaginary person breathing down my neck. I know it's got to be this particular day, and for whatever reason I've managed to get my mind into this mindset. I'm doing this every day, and parts of me would love a manager to kind of say, hey, you need to do this, and someone who's not just, okay, Bez, you wrote this to-do list, remember to do it, but like someone who's like, hey, you haven't written that down, but you really need to do this. But you know, we kind of need to have that from ourselves. Is a sad thing, because that's actually recently I've started becoming privileged enough that I've had someone coming over 1 day a week to help me doing stuff for LDEC, and now I'm actually having Layla spend 2 or 3 hours a week doing stuff for the Twitter. And it's like managing people is actually a really difficult job. I've realized, to actually be a good manager and say, these are the things you need to do, this is your priorities. And yeah,
I find that when I was doing the scene, for example, I like the fact that it's like that we're not sort of like I wasn't imposing authority over people to do things. That we talked about it in advance, and we agreed that that my role within the sort of like what we were doing was to sort of help herd kittens along, and to every week or so check in on people, and to do it in a way that sort of like that hopefully wasn't like reminded people about what needed done, but not in a way that sort of felt badgering or over the top. And so I think it's really about how you manage that. Like, like in a workplace where you're going for wage labor, like the authority of your boss is the authority of usually it's the authority of someone that's been put in charge over you as your babysitter. Whereas in a project like the zine that we're making here, it's more about us agreeing that there's certain tasks that need done, and assigning those tasks and accepting that collectively. So yeah, I feel like you've got a good thing going where you are. You're saying you've got sort of like someone you're working with, you know how these tasks have been delineated, and you've got good communication if something were to break down. So it's a whole different social relationship than one of someone in charge of someone else.
But still, having you there to kind of chase people up, like if having kind of made that obligation to someone else, yes, that's initial saying this is what I'm going to do, but then having someone else around there to keep you accountable. And,
Yeah.
you know, that leads me to the final thing that we were going to talk about, which is how do you stay inspired to make stuff? Like, I realize that I need that external motivation. I need that community. Like, presumably, once you've started working with people, it's like, oh, it's not just me, it's also them. And there's part of that with collaboration. Like when you're working on a game with other people, or if it's like, hey, I'm working on a game and I've got to playtest it on Friday. I've got to make it meaningfully different. I've got to advance it enough where people playing it again will actually give me useful information. And so I'm beholden to that. And honestly, like there would have been some days when I was like, okay, I've not got anything. Okay, I wake up at 7 and then I spend a bit of time thinking about it. And between 7 and 9, then I do my shower routine, but then also spend like an hour and a bit, you know, just updating the game and doing everything. And it just gives me a little kick up the posterior to be like, yes, I'm going to get this done.
Yeah.
Like, where do you find motivation from?
Usually I've got an idea that I'm really keen on, and I just sort of drill down on that. And sometimes it grinds to a halt, and sometimes it goes really slow. It just depends on what the idea is. I've got a few different games that I'm designing at any given time. I think that helps, that I sometimes flip between different game ideas and different sort of little projects, so that even though one's waning, it never grinds to a halt. So yeah, but my general outlook is one of, I've just tried, like, I've always got some little projects on the go, even beyond game design or zine making, and so I've got just an interest in carrying it all on. Oh, Bez, you're on mute.
Thank you. If we want to wrap it up and say fundamentally, why create? What is your motivation for your creative endeavors? What brings you joy about this?
It is the joy of creation. It's the enjoyment of the act of creation.
That's a very tautological answer.
I've no love of industry. I have no love of the idea. I have no love for the games industry as a whole. The bits about putting my games out in the world that I really dislike are actually this sort of promotion. Not that I've really enjoyed today. This has been really good, but I find it quite nerve-wracking. And the idea that to be a success for a game, it does have to be who you know and getting good art to catch the eye and that sort of thing. The bits I love about it and the bits that keep me going are the fact that I get to work with amazing artists, people that I really love. I get to collaborate with other people who I think are brilliant. I get to meet other people who I think are wonderful and doing great things. And so those are the things that keep me going. It's the joy and the fun and the sort of like creative spark. That's what keeps it going.
That's a really nice way to put it. And with that, even though I've not been taking notes today, which is very remiss of me, normally I have my wee notebook, but I came outside for a treat because it is just so sunny. We have talked about just so much. We've talked about the game of Dracula. We've talked about C is for Cookie and Roland Rat. We've talked about we've talked about being vegan and what we eat. We've talked about the nature of lab-grown meat. We've talked about being introduced to games and Games Workshop and Fighting Fantasy. We've talked about the humanity of a games club and the responsibility, but still needing a little bit of leadership so that everyone's made aware of what needs to be done and everyone's able to step up to the role. We talked about, Edinburgh indie gamers kind of having these Sunday meetings and then the evening meetings and people coming together to pitch their games and coming together for just the joy of role-playing. We talked about making sure to set your expectations low if you're starting something, whether that be a games club or indeed anything. You don't need to sell 1 million. You don't need to sell 1,000. You don't need to sell 500. You don't need to necessarily even sell 100. Like, you can do a zine and just make it. Speaking of which, we talked about zines. We talked about the joy of just everyone making stuff, about different ways of stapling things, unscrewing bits to staple them together, about different printing techniques, and a very impressively open spreadsheets where you can get all the numbers, and that's publicly available. We talked about the Edinburgh Indie Gamer Zine and the Edinburgh Indie Showcase, which is like just a party to kind of celebrate what you've been doing. And of course, we talked about the act of creation and just the sheer joy of creation. And yeah, thank you very much for that chat. Is there anything else that you would like to say right now?
Just a very big thank you for having me on, Bez. This has actually been a lot of fun. I normally find these things completely nerve-wracking, and this has just been a hoot. Thank you.
That's lovely to hear. If you want to find me, of course, people should know by now I'm Stuff by Bez everywhere, stuffbybez.com, stuffbybez.bigcards.com, where you can buy print and play versions of my stuff, twitter.com/stuffbez, instagram.com/stuffbez, twitch.tv/stuffbez, youtube.com/stuffbez, where both of them I've got the streams every day at 10 a.m. UK time, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 4 p.m. UK time, and also Tuesdays at 8 p.m. and stuffbybez.com/discord, where join my Discord, where we can talk about game design, and that's actually a redirect. So if you go stuffbybez.com/discord, that will actually redirect to the correct Discord thing. So yeah, because real Discord links are a real pain. And if you want to be found, if you want to check out Tanya, then where do you most like to be found?
If you search for Time of Tribes on Twitter, Instagram, that kind of thing, you can talk to me personally there, on my website.com, timeoftribes.com. Those are places to grab hold of me personally, and some of the other links you've posted there link on to where we're hosting the zines digital version on itch, and also our Facebook group. And if you want to get hold of the club itself, go to tinyurl.com/welcome to EIG, and that's TO, welcome to EIG.
And of course, like, there's Nagademon, National Game Development Month.
Yeah, we didn't get to talk about that. That was a whole other thing that I hope to talk about, but maybe some other time. Check out nagademon.org and you'll find out all about it.
So, this is where I always say it's over to you. What are you up to? You can share, but only if you want to. And so anyone in the comments, if you're just lurking, that's totally fine. But if you want to share pretty much anything, like, you know the rules, like, keep it family friendly, but we can talk about serious stuff. But like, what are you up to? Do you have something you're excited to do? Are you going to wander around maybe because it's a sunny day? Are you going to maybe do a bit of sleeping because you haven't slept enough last night? Are you maybe based in another part of the world and it's your bedtime? Do you have a project you're about to do? Something you're about to write? Something you're not looking forward to, but you're maybe want to be beholden to because you want that external pressure? We can be that external pressure. So whether it's serious or frivolous, yeah, let us know. What are you up to, Tanya?
Today I will be looking after my youngest. We'll go out to head past the post office to send off. A few of these got damaged in the post, so I'll be sending replacements, and then I'll be heading to the park and playing. I think that's my youngin' just came in the front door, so I'm going to go make them lunch right now.
That sounds so delightful. I have to customize a couple of boxes for the winner of the LDEC contest. That was the Twitter contest because we reached 200 followers, which was quite exciting. That's my new Twitter account. And of course, if you want to find out all my new streams, stuffmybeds.com/streams. I am going to be back on at 4 p.m. I am going to be playing something. I am planning to play Potion Explosion, the digital version, ready to take on Panic tomorrow. Hello, Tanya's wee one. Hello.
I'm talking. This is Bez. Hello, Bez.
Hello. And Xenofield there says, hello, child.
Oh, I think this is where I'm going to have to skip out of the live stream. I thought we were finishing at 12 today, so...
Yes, we
okay?
have gone on a wee bit long. I do apologise.
That's okay.
I can finish on my own if you want me to remove you.
Oh, I think I'll have to. So thank you very much for having me on, Bez.
Thank you so much, and all the best with everything.
Cheers. Okay, bye now.
Just close the window. Bye-bye.
Say bye-bye.
And of course, yes, so Xenofuel said you'll be reading the gamification guide for this Kickstarter game I got. Gamification guide. Wow, so that's telling you how... I don't know what that... I mean, so it's a guide on how to gamify things, like turn work into games, or... But, yeah, that sounds pretty gosh darn good. Yeah. Anyway, as I was saying, if you're on YouTube or wherever you are, share, spread the word, do the thumb like, follow, and let me actually do exclamation mark links. And so, yeah, if you have I messed that up? If you're on Twitch, do remember to check out the LDEC design contest and also the arts contest. Okay, great. They are separate. Yes, please check out the typography contest and the art contest at the end. Yeah, I've got nothing left to say. I'm going to check out who to raid. So, yep, feel free to say anything else while I go on Twitch and looking for a person to raid into now. And we are going to raid to someone that I will choose right now. Okay, let's see, let's do... Ben Smith is doing music, Idle Michael is chatting, Emma Grace, or let's do Theodore Elfving, and I am going to read them. They are doing music, and I haven't checked out this person very much, but I am sure they are excellent if I've followed them in the past. So, that is the end of the show. Lots of love to everyone, and thank you as always, Xenofuel, for being part of the chat. Please do copy paste the raid call, and the last thing that I always like to say is, of course, bye 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 bye. This is the goodbye song. Bye 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye bye, bye bye. This is the end of the show. Bye bye, bye bye. And now it's time to go. Bye bye bye. This is the goodbye song. Bye bye, bye bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye bye, bye bye. This is the end of the show. Bye bye. Bye bye. And now it's time to go. Bye bye. Bye bye. Have a wonderful day. And yeah, enjoy everything. Bye 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 bye. That's the end. Oh, and thank you very much, Refrainy. Thank you for following. You are just in time to join the raid where we go and raid a guitarist who is apparently warming up just now. But yeah, thank you and bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye 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 bye. Bye bye again.